If you're sitting here listening to all this talk about book coaching, thinking that you would love to be a book coach and you know you would be a great book coach, but you're talking yourself out of it because of some reason, I have some things to say about that. That's usually imposter syndrome talking. And last year I recorded 2 videos on this topic. The first is about where imposter syndrome tends to show up in book coaching and in writing, which, spoiler alert, is everywhere. And the second is 3 things that you can do about it right now. I've stitched those videos together here, and they're going to roll right from this introduction, so let's get to them. I want to talk about imposter syndrome in book coaching and how it comes out and how pervasive it is. I have been amazed in my time running Author Accelerator and coaching coaches how much imposter syndrome comes up in our conversations and how much it matters and how much you have to be aware of it in order to do your best work and in order to help your writers do their best work. It is just pervasive. And in this video, I want to talk about how imposter syndrome shows up in book coaching, or if you're thinking about becoming a book coach, how it shows up in the conversations you might have with yourself before you decide to do it. And then I'm going to do some other videos in the same series on what to do about it. So this is just how it shows up. And the reason that I know imposter syndrome is such a big deal is that I experience it myself all the time. I have been coaching for 12 years. I've had a great deal of success. I've made a lot of money. My clients have made a lot of money. My clients have landed big agents, big book deals. They've landed on bestseller lists. They have proven that I know what I'm doing. I have systems and processes that work, that are proven to work. I know I'm good at it. I can tell when I'm doing the work of coaching that I'm working in my zone of genius. I listen, I ask good questions. My writers and I have amazing relationships. It's just all good, even when it's not good, because the creative process has its ups and downs. But I always feel that I can bring something to the table, that I'm bringing value to the table. So I'm very secure in my skills and in my talents and in my knowledge that I know what I'm doing. And yet I experience imposter syndrome all the time. Just this week, I was working with a potential client. They've actually been working with me for weeks as they've been trying to decide whether they want to hire me. Now, I have a process where I decide if I want to work with someone. I choose my clients. That's one of the reasons why I'm so successful as a book coach. I choose who I want to work with. I know what I'm looking for. I want to work with people who have expertise in some other realm, who are passionate about bringing their project to life, who are coachable. They want to learn. They want to be in collaboration with somebody else. They want this work and they understand how hard this work is. There's a lot of things that I look for. And this particular client I had found all these things in this client, and I thought that he had the opportunity to write a book that was going to really make an impact. And I was excited to work on the project. So I had already picked him. But he needed to pick me. So he was interviewing me. He asked to speak to my current and former clients. I knew he was speaking to other book coaches. He was taking his sweet time to do his due diligence, as he should. Do it. Make a good decision. It costs a lot of money to work with me. It's going to take a lot of time. It's a big decision. I want someone to get it right. So I'm just waiting to hear what he's going to decide. And then what happened this week was he came back to me and said, yes, he wanted to work with me. He chose me. And my immediate reaction was, oh no. It was, what if I ruin his project? What if I'm not the right person? What if I don't know what I'm doing? What if I wreck this whole thing? That was the first thing that flashed through my mind. And fortunately, I've been doing this long enough that I recognized it and I named it. And I said, I hear that voice. I know what that voice is, and I'm not going to listen to it. I know I'm going to be able to help this person. So then I was able to bring in the joy and the excitement of this project. And of course, my brain is already spinning. The gears are spinning about how I'm going to help and what research I'm going to do to be prepared for our start and all the other things that, it's the work. I was ready then to dig into the work. But that imposter syndrome comes up so fast and so hard. And the thing that's interesting is that I know it also comes up for my writers. I am amazed at how often my writers exhibit imposter syndrome in different ways. And usually these are people who are experts in their field. They have had a lot of successes in a different realm, but book writing is new to them. And they're sort of freaking out that they don't know this whole universe of publishing. And that makes them nervous. They also tend to get nervous about raising their voice, taking up space, making a claim for this message or this thing that they're teaching or that they believe in or that they want to write or their story. And so they get nervous, and I'm used to helping people through that. I don't think there is a person that I've worked with who hasn't had something along those lines of some kind of imposter syndrome while we're working together, and that it hasn't come out in the process of coaching. It just does. It's just a thing. It's just real. It's just there. I have also seen imposter syndrome bubble up in all of the coaches that I teach at Author Accelerator in our book coach certification program. We have conversations around these ideas, and they come out in different ways. So some of the ways that imposter syndrome comes out is what I just described, that sense of, I don't want to fail my writer. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to steer them wrong. Other ways that it comes out is maybe I'm not good enough to help them. Maybe I don't know enough to help them. The first time you coach somebody on a topic that you know nothing about is a time imposter syndrome is going to come up for sure. I once coached a Wall Street Journal reporter whose beat was the coal mining industry in the Virginias, and that whole area is a part of the country I don't know. I've never been to. I know zero about coal mining, ore mining, coal mining, any of it. I knew nothing. And he's writing front page articles on this industry. And I said to him, I don't know anything about coal mining or that region or this industry, but I know how to write a book and I know how to help you write a book. If you're good with that, we can do this. And he said, it was great. He said, I know everything there is to know about the coal industry. I don't know anything about how to write a book, so I need you. And that is another sign of a great client, is when they know what they don't know. But that imposter syndrome for the coach can come out if you're thinking, I can't coach that person because I don't know their topic. That's a type of imposter syndrome as well. Other ways that imposter syndrome shows up for book coaches is when you start thinking that you need to have a book of your own that did well. Lots of times coaches get kind of antsy and they think, I need to publish a book and it needs to do well. Otherwise, I don't have credibility as a coach. That's a way that it will show up. Imposter syndrome also shows up in your behaviors as a book coach. There is all kinds of work to be done around setting boundaries with your clients, not over-delivering, not doing more than you promise. That's another place imposter syndrome can show itself. If you're so nervous about, do they think that you're worth it? Do they think that they're getting their money's worth? And that over-delivering is that overcompensating for that fear. Imposter syndrome shows up in book coaches a lot around pricing. It is a big conversation that we are always having around pricing, around not undervaluing yourself. It's so easy to set low prices because you think nobody will pay, or I can't promise agent or a book deal. Nobody can promise that. There is no guarantee for that. So if I can't promise that, maybe I can't charge very much because that's what people really want. And that's how the conversation goes in your head around pricing. Or I will give away my work for free as a marketing tactic. I think that's a way imposter syndrome can show up as well. Or I'll give away my work for free to friends and family. That's a way that it comes up a lot. There are so many ways imposter syndrome can show itself when you're pricing your work and putting packages together. And it takes a lot to combat that, which is what I'm going to talk about in the next video in this series, is about what we can do to combat these types of imposter syndrome that show up in book coaching. This is my second video about imposter syndrome in book coaching. If you haven't listened to the first video, go do that and then come back to this one, because in that one, I talked about how imposter syndrome tends to show up. And in this one, I'm talking about what to do about it. So there's 3 things that I think help to combat imposter syndrome. The first is to simply understand what it is and where it comes from and when you're hearing it. And I think the very best way to do this is to read a fabulous book called Playing Big by Tara Moore. I love this book. I recommend it all the time to coaches, to writers, to friends, to anybody. I just think it is a fabulous book because it talks about the cultures that and the systems that tend to train us to think in this imposter syndrome way. And it's specifically speaking toward women. And I find that women have this sense of imposter syndrome more than men. So I bet that more women are listening to this than men are. And Tara Moore talks about why that is, all the way back to how our school systems are run, the cultural expectations that we have, all kinds of systems that just teach women especially to tamp themselves down, to lower their voice, to turn down the volume, to not take up space. And understanding that these imposter syndrome feelings and ideas and voices are not necessarily from us, that they're things that we learn, they're things that we were gained by just being alive in the world today. That helps. At least it helps me to see where it comes from and why it's there and why we may be thinking the way that we're thinking. That it just is enormously illuminating to have it named like that. So just simply, the first thing is just simply understanding where it comes from and what it is and how it's showing up for you. The book Playing Big has a lot of exercises where you do things to try to understand the particular way imposter syndrome is showing up for you, how it sounds, the voice in your head, how to recognize it. It's just enormously helpful. It's a great strategy. Just read this book, do the exercises. I mean, I'm a book coach. I'm always recommending books as answers to things because, of course, books are how we learn and grow and get ideas, and then we practice them out in the world. The second way to combat or overcome imposter syndrome is to look at other people who you are inspired by who have not let it stop them or who are not exhibiting signs of feeling like an imposter. Your inspiration can come from so many different places and so many different people. It doesn't have to be in our industry or in our realm. It can just be watching somebody who is taking up space and claiming their power and being big in the world, playing big in the world. I love looking for these types of people out there, and they're everywhere if you keep your eyes open. It could be something as simple as, I'm not really a Taylor Swift fan. My children were. I have two grown daughters, and they played Taylor Swift in our house all the time. So I was like a fan adjacent to Taylor Swift. And there's an amazing documentary, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's easy to find, kind of behind the scenes look at her rise to fame and some of the things she had to combat. And she's a young woman with a ton of power and a huge audience, and her claiming of her voice and her not being stopped by the systems that would stop her is so inspiring. And once I watched that documentary, I became a Taylor Swift fan, not necessarily of her music, although her music is great and I like it, but of her story. And you can follow her on Twitter, for example, and see how she combats her people who would attack her or try to tear her down, and how she takes up space, how she raises her voice. It's just terribly inspiring. You can find inspiration all over the place. Someone like Amanda Gorman, for example, the poet who read at the presidential inauguration as a very young girl and then had a huge best-selling book and has had this amazing rise to fame, and people are constantly trying to knock her down. And you could imagine imposter syndrome getting the better of her, and yet here she is doing the work and creating things and taking up space in the world and claiming her power and her voice. So inspiring. I love her story. I'm also always inspired by Brené Brown, just the way she is in the world, the books she writes, the messages that she gives. She is all about owning your own power. If we want to talk in books, which we always do, all of her books are so great for overcoming imposter syndrome. But I think especially The Gifts of Imperfection. That is a book that helps you see you don't have to be perfect to do good work, and that your vulnerabilities are actually where your power lies. And the entire book is just, it doesn't even make sense to underline or dog ear that book. You just want to underline the whole thing. Brene Brown works in that space. Her expertise is in researching shame, and shame is adjacent to imposter syndrome. It's that idea of not being enough, or being afraid of how you're being seen, or that shame sense. And that's her area of expertise. So it makes sense that her books would speak to somebody who's feeling imposter syndrome. So listening to Brene Brown's TED Talks, or following her on social media, reading her books, another way just to get inspired and to see somebody who's walking the walk as well as talking the talk. And the third way to get over imposter syndrome is just to take meaningful action towards the thing you want to be. And there are so many books that can help us with this. If you're thinking of becoming a book coach, if you are a book coach and you want to do more marketing, narrow your audience down so that you're serving a particular kind of client. Like if you want to start saying no to some people and yes to others, that can be such a moment of imposter syndrome, because you're like, I can't say no to that client. I might never get another one. I can't wait for the perfect client. I have to settle. I have to take less than. That's a kind of imposter syndrome. Like you're saying to yourself, I can't attract the exact right clients. I have to take what I can get. And taking meaningful action against those things is how you're going to build this muscle to combat imposter syndrome. And being the kind of book coach you want to be, charging the prices that you want to charge, working with the kind of clients you want to work with, that's what you want to move to. And any meaningful action you can take toward that is going to be really useful. And they can be small actions. I love the recommendation Pamela Slim gives. She's the author of a book called The Widest Net. And she talks about tiny, how does she call them? Tiny meaningful actions, I think. Certainly has the word tiny in it, but that's what I always associate with Pam, is take these tiny actions. Just do one small thing. Do one small thing a day to move toward this thing you want to be. And of course, the book that is enormously helpful in taking action is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Follow him on Instagram. It's like he's speaking to writers and book coaches. It's just he's speaking our language, and the actions that he has us take, he talks in terms of habits, of course, and it's the small habits that add up to the identity that you want to be. That's the way he talks about it, is do the things that the people you want to be are doing. So if you want to be a book coach who works with a certain kind of client, take the kinds of actions that the book coach who works with those kind of clients would take and would do, and take the small actions that are going to lead up to the big identity shift. I think that's where the real rubber meets the road on beating imposter syndrome, is the small things that you do every day to be the kind of person you want to be, and to build up that confidence and that muscle and that skill and those habits, so that when the imposter syndrome voice comes flooding into your mind, which it will, you can say, oh, I see what that is. I'm not buying it. I'm not listening to it. I want to be a great book coach. I want to help my clients. I'm going to go on and just keep doing that work.